Story 1. Called for a welfare check on my elderly neighbor I had not seen in a while. Thankfully, it turned out she had moved in with her daughter. Story 2. Called police to report a woman screaming and attacking a man. Officers arrived. She screamed at them, demanded that they shoot her, and attacked them. They used a taser and took her into custody. Story 3. I was no more than belly button deep in methamphetamine-induced psychosis. For days awake with no sleep, literally shaking and hyperventilating with terror, sweat dripping off my forehead like a leaky faucet. I was fully certain that two men were traveling around in my walls, spraying toxic chemicals into my house and moving things when I left a room and came back. I had no mental capacity to recognize how blatantly my appearance revealed how disheveled and deeply unwell my mental state had become over the prior 3 or 4 weeks. My house was a disaster, and so was I. My toenails had grown so long they curled at the ends and clacked against the hardwood floors. My beard was wild and greasy, caked with food debris and dried blood from constant dehydration nosebleeds during my binge. My bright green irises were just a thin line surrounding my shark-like, massive pupils. My eyelids were unnaturally wide open, but bags and wrinkles under my eyes made me look 5 years older than my actual young age. I was shaking and stumbled around like I was drunk, my body collapsing from extreme sleep deprivation while my brain remained wide awake. Around me were the ruins of my beautiful home, which I had allowed to decay into vomit-inducing filth over the last few weeks. I wore the same clothes I had on for at least 7 days straight, reeking of ammonia sweat from the drug and its metabolites excreted through my sweat glands. The police were kind enough to hang out in my foyer, even though I invited them at least once to look inside my walls for the men. My house is over 100 years old, and all my walls are solid brick or plaster, which I knew before this episode. They gently asked, "Have you been taking any substances you shouldn't, or maybe not taking some substances you should?" For some reason, I caught a quick breath of reality and saw this as an opportunity to stop the collapse of my life. I told them I had been using methamphetamine on and off for about 1.5 years and had been binging hard for the last 4 days. I also apologized for calling the emergency line because I wasn't sure there were actually men in my walls. They offered to take me to the emergency room to check my vitals just to be safe. I was really scared. The psychotic part of my mind believed the officers were cartel members who would drive me to the country and kill me if I got in the car. But I trusted my gut that my mind was lying to me and I needed help. So I accepted the ride and braced for death. Turned out they were real police officers, and they waited with me until a nurse took me back. The next day, I checked into a 28-day inpatient program. I wasn't capable of appreciating it at the time, but in retrospect, it was really cool of them not to approach the situation from a criminal perspective. They never asked me to give them my drugs, never asked for information about my dealer, didn't take pictures of the horrific condition of my house, and never made condescending comments. I never felt like they looked down on me for being a fully reality-adjacent methamphetamine user. They genuinely seemed to want me to get checked for my own safety. They gently informed me that my circumstances appeared dire and that my mental health was far worse than my delusional addict self could recognize at the time. The shock of interacting with two calm, normal people for the first time in weeks, juxtaposed with my unrecognizable life and home, which I hadn't noticed falling apart little by little, was a big factor in motivating me to check into that inpatient program and get clean. I saw how far I had strayed from where I was supposed to be, and I didn't like what I saw. Story 4. I was driving 60 miles per hour in a 45 miles per hour zone. I got pulled over. The police officer was very professional, and it was a good interaction. I was just warned to slow down. Story 5. Road crew had their signs mixed up. The speed limit is 30 miles per hour because it is a narrow, winding road. They put up signs saying it was 40 miles per hour in the construction zone, and the exit speed limit sign was 45 miles per hour. I called the police because I was worried some careless tourist was going to hurt themselves. Story 6. My friend's little girl found bones near the creek by their apartment. I called the police to confirm they were just deer bones. Story 7. When my internet was switched to fiber and my landline to voice over internet protocol, my phone line started making calls to directory assistants. Lots of them. They supposedly fixed it, but then it started calling emergency services. A sheriff's deputy showed up after midnight one night because of it. Fortunately, I was still awake. It only took the phone company 2 months to fix it this time. Story 8. A man was preparing to jump off a roof near my office. They were working on talking him down, and they succeeded. They warned us to stay away from the windows because no one needs that image seared into their mind. Story 9. They were looking for a man they believed was running in our direction armed with a weapon. About 10 seconds later, I saw a man matching that description hiding in some bushes about half a block behind me. I flagged down the next police car, and they took the man away. I am not sure what happened after that. It was an interesting start to my morning. Story 10. Called the police last summer because I heard what sounded like a woman getting beaten down the road from me. I could not take a chance without having it checked out. Story 11. Saw a couple of people at the train station with a dog they were training and asked them where the donut shop was. They knew, so I thanked them on my way back. Story 12. I asked them why they were talking to my neighbor's son, who has a mental disability. Turns out they did not know. They brought him home safely and spoke with me about who his caretaker is. I explained that his mother lives with him and is at work. Everything was fine. Story 13. My friends and I were playing basketball at the park around 11 p.m. A police officer was checking the park and told us not to be there shortly after. Story 14. I had a minor electrical fire at my house a few months ago. While the firefighters managed the situation, the police officer took all my information. Story 15. They were chasing a suspect, and they were hoping my door camera recorded it. Sadly, we only captured the 2 officers running quickly trying to catch him. Story 16. Rolled a stop sign in my neighborhood. He was our usual police officer, the same person who is always on patrol in my neighborhood. He told me to be sure to stop completely and then sent me on my way. Story 17. A man decided overnight to build a lean-to shelter near the city garbage cans using random debris and a pallet. He was on private property. I did not approach him myself on my quiet and secluded suburban street as a lone female. I contacted the local police department to inform him that he had to leave and was not allowed to return. He has not come back. Story 18. I saw someone oversteer their motorcycle during a turn and crash on the road ahead of me, so I stopped and rendered aid. It quickly became apparent that the rider was impaired, so I declined to help her lift the bike back up. She then became confrontational and splashed blood from her injured hand into my face and onto a pregnant passerby. She ran down the street, and the police caught up to her and brought her back to be taken away by ambulance, handcuffed to the gurney. I gave a statement to the police after that, and that was the last time I talked to them. Story 19. The city used to have an anonymous prescription drug drop box. It was not where it normally was. Turns out they removed it and discarded it. Story 20. Hoon drivers and a car on fire on the side of the road. Where I used to live, I would often go down a mountain road that had a larger open area at the top. If I went that way after 10 at night, they would always be there, often 30 to 50 cars and people milling around over the road. It was outrageously dangerous as they would do burnouts, smoke it up, and then randomly walk across the road drinking and having a good time, often provisional drivers too. I called the police maybe half a dozen times on them but gave up because nothing would happen. The last time I only called because of the fire, and I was concerned about it starting a massive bushfire. Story 21. Driving late at night on a very rainy road. Moving too slowly on the freeway because I hydroplaned during heavy rain and could not see for a few seconds, which was terrifying. The officer did not give me a ticket but told me to switch to the slower lane. I had not looked far enough outside my lane to notice that the third, slower lane had already reopened. Story 22. I was assaulted by a random person on the bus on Valentine's Day of this year. I had to get 5 stitches and now have a permanent scar just below my eye. I made a witness statement but never heard anything back. I assume it was filed and never reviewed again. Story 23. Does emergency dispatch count? I was thinking of a little scenic drive through a valley between 2 hills. I saw what I thought was a bonfire in a person's driveway. It almost looked like their white Infiniti SUV's engine was on fire. Mind you, I saw this while driving past. It was about 100 meters away from the road, so I turned around and drove by again. Lo and behold, this car was calmly on fire, the alarm blazing, about 6 feet from the house. I stopped, obviously. Before I could call emergency services, a lady ran out of the front of the house. She grabbed the hose and started trying to put the fire out. Long story short, not what you expect to see on a Saturday. Story 24. I saw a woman get punched in the face, and then about 5 other men started yelling at her. I called the police. Story 25. Called the police while driving on the highway. A group of reckless drivers were racing through traffic, almost causing several accidents in the short time they passed by during moderate traffic on a late Saturday night. Story 26. Telling them about the quality of the curry I had last night and finding out if they had a good time at a barbecue. One of my good friends is in the police. Story 27. I called to report that my 90-year-old grandmother was not responding to phone calls or text messages. Her almost 30-year-old great-granddaughter, her boyfriend, and their 2 children under 2 were living in my grandmother's basement in poor conditions. The boyfriend had previously pulled a gun on my cousin while she was holding a baby. The situation downstairs was disgusting. There was a bag of trash by the door filled with hundreds of live flies. Flies were in the bathroom, all over the place in the hallway on the way to the children's room. We found a bong and other smoking paraphernalia. Food and water were left out in glasses. Silverware was stuck to the ground. The shower curtain was saturated with black mold. Water was leaking onto the floor from the shower area, next to an overflowing cat litter box. The smell of cat urine and cigarette smoke made my grandmother immediately go back upstairs. She could not stay down there at all. There was no ventilation, only one way in and out, and no natural lighting. The 2-year-old cannot walk or talk. He cannot grab things or make eye contact when spoken to, but he apparently does not have hearing issues. Child Protective Services will be notified. They were very lazy people. They moved out today and relocated to someone else's home. They will never take advantage of my grandmother again. Story 28. They were on a horse. We were with family, and one of the young ones wanted to see the horse. The officer invited her to pet the horse and take a photo. Story 29. I gave a witness statement for a friend going through a domestic violence situation after we did the panicked move out of the shared home and had set them up in a new, undisclosed house. Story 30. 3 kids tried to carjack me, but I was on a Vespa. They ran me off the road 100 feet from my house with a car. 2 punched me in the head while I wore a helmet. Not smart. I'm sure their hands hurt. I skjutet. 4. Fire. Because people come for fire, not for help. The 3rd tried to steal my still-running Vespa but didn't know how to drive it and ran it into the opposite curb. The first 2 jumped into their car. I went after the kid with my helmet as a weapon. He jumped off the Vespa and got into the car. I backed off and they drove away, running over the handlebar in the process. It was totaled. The police came and were thorough in questioning. I was surprised I got the license plate, make, and model. They caught the kids 4 hours later trying to carjack an actual car. I have a new Vespa. Same helmet. Story 31. I went 39 years of my life with minimal reasons to speak to the police. Within 1 week, I spoke to them about 4 separate things. My ex-husband tried to kill me. His girlfriend came and banged on my door while he was under arrest, thinking he was at my house and not in jail. My neighbor tried to kick my door in because a delivery driver parked outside her house while delivering to me. My daughter and her friends were assaulted and had homophobic slurs yelled at them on her 14th birthday. I am a nice, normal person. Felt like I was living in the mouth of hell that week. My ex went to prison for 7 months. He got out in October 2023 and started harassing me again. I went to the police again in January 2024. My case is due in court this September, almost 2 years since my last report. I have spoken to the police this week to get an update. The reason it has taken so long is that he blamed the police for abusive process to try to get out of his charges, so a separate case had to be held, which got postponed 3 times. It's all tactics to try to avoid court. Story 32. A man arrived in our dead-end country lane in a utility vehicle with a smashed windscreen and no license plates. He panicked when I approached to see what he was doing and drove away. I found the local police officer and informed him. It turned out the man was on the run and had also threatened some neighbors after he left. Story 33. I asked them if I could use some portable toilets, and they asked if I wanted to be arrested. Lovely stuff. Story 34. The officer turned on his sirens on the opposite side of the highway, so I pulled over, thinking I was speeding. He just slowed down and told me, "You were going a little fast, but I am not going to give you a ticket," then drove off. About 15 minutes later, I was getting gas in a shared parking lot with a Dairy Queen, and this same officer came walking out with a blizzard. Story 35. Every workday, I say hello to the military police on my way onto the base. I got lucky and had a random search with dogs one day. Random, they are never out there on a day that's not perfect. I'm a construction worker in an old truck, and those guys have no sense of humor. If the military wanted them to have a sense of humor, they would have been issued one. Story 36. Needed information about communication during a restraining order. I was given incorrect information. Luckily, I work in this area, so I realized it and did not make things worse. I have never had a positive experience with any law enforcement in Manitoba in my entire life. When I was home invaded, no one came. I was 16 and so was my friend. We had to chase the assailant off on our own. When my home was broken into, no one came. The door was kicked in while I was at work. They had been watching me, and they laid out all my underwear. No one came. I tried to get a mental health call for someone, and they put 3 guns in their face. I do not have a lot of faith in the Royal Canadian Mounted Police or Winnipeg Police Service, but I do hope they can start to do better. It is the only way forward. Story 37. I called the police on my brother because he had a gun and was waving it around, threatening the family while he was angry and intoxicated. It was like a small family gathering, I suppose. Fortunately, the police checked the gun and confirmed it was not loaded. Story 38. I do my best not to talk to the police. The last time I had to talk to the police was over a fight at work. Story 39. My child, aged 11, was sitting in a parking lot behind our house playing with their toys. A neighbor called the police. Story 40. 2 officers were looking for a person to serve a summons on. This is usually done by one board police officer, as they are mostly trivial court attendance notices. They were looking for Unit 14. There are only 12 units. I wonder what the real story was. Story 41. My friends and I were walking on the beach, and one of us was carrying a bag containing diving equipment. They stopped us to see what was in the bag because they seemed suspicious. Story 42. The man was at my door at 2:30, and I was home alone and freaked out. Turned out he was delivering food and had the wrong address. Story 43. One person showed up at my house at 8 a.m. looking for the previous owner. I don't have a new address for them, but I offered to find their real estate agent's name, which the officer declined. He didn't seem particularly upset or concerned either. He was like, "All right then, thanks anyway." I imagine the previous owner wasn't being arrested or anything. I wonder what it was about. Story 44. I thought my appendix had burst because I had really bad stomach pains and was basically living on the bathroom floor. Story 45. I was cleaning an apartment in a controlled access building. I was outside smoking, and the police officer wanted to know if I could grant him entry. I told him to dial 000 for the office, as per the sign. Story 46. Someone stole my identity and applied for unemployment in my name. The authorities were unhelpful and refused to file a report. Story 47. My wife was verbally assaulted by one of our neighbors. All we did was ask them not to park in front of our garage. Nothing was done about it. Story 48. Neighbors being obnoxiously loud again. That was the non-emergency line. 911 was to report a rollover accident. Story 49. My brother-in-law is a police officer, and I see him regularly. Before that, I was pulled over by a state trooper for having a tail light out. I was surprised I got off with a warning since I had been driving with it out for weeks and had passed several police officers who did not care enough to pull me over. Story 50. To have them run my vehicle license plate number while riding my bicycle to see if I would get pulled over if it was scanned. Story 51. If retired officers count, it is because two of my neighbors were career officers. Otherwise, I bought lunch for a couple of highway patrol officers once, about 10 years ago, as a sign of citizen appreciation for a job I would not want to do, but they do it anyway. Story 52. The police had blocked off the street I live on. I was trying to go home after a 10-hour workday, and I was tired. Apparently, there was an incident at a house a few houses down from me. The officer said he did not care and that I could not go home. I was very angry. I wanted to swear at him, but that would mean spending the night in jail. Story 53. Tell them about a car that stopped in the middle of a busy intersection because a wheel fell off. This way, they could arrange traffic control. Story 54. Driving down the highway, and though I was paying attention, the person in front of me did not have brake lights, and I almost hit him. Story 55. I was chatting with a possible predator, or so my mom thought, so I was questioned by a police officer. He did not do anything, so we still do not know if he is a predator or not. If not, he is probably dead though. Story 56. Trying to get the will my wife is the executor for. We need to prove that she is the executor before they will help us. But the only proof that she is the executor is on the will. Get proper wills done, people. Although the above will is legally valid, since she is not legally her stepfather's daughter and not in physical possession of the will, we are stuck. I guess we will pass it off to his legal next of kin. Story 57. I do not talk to police officers and you should not either. Story 58. Because in the history of all red lights, the red light has always meant stop. I was yielding because I had a delivery to make, and I did not want to be stuck for 15 minutes. No one was on the other side of the bridge. Rude, condescending officer. Not everyone knows for sure. Anger and resentment are over. In the end, I learned my lesson and am grateful I only received 2 warnings. One for not stopping properly, and one because it was in a construction zone. Story 59. Random breath testing. Doesn't anybody get stopped and breathalyzed and alcohol or drug tested? Takes 15 seconds and then you go. Story 60. I opened my phone to check the map while cycling at night. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a police officer waved his light baton in front of me and told me to stop. He then started asking questions, such as where I was going and for my identification. He took notes, gave me a brief scolding, and then walked away. Story 61. When I was in elementary school, I found a wallet in an alleyway and turned it in to my school. A police officer came to the school and spoke to me about it. Apparently, the owner had his car broken into, and his gun and wallet were both stolen. The alleyway was far from where the robbery occurred, and he told me it helped their investigation. Story 62. I witnessed a car accident. I tend to stay and give a testimony, especially after being in an accident myself. Story 63. 3 years ago, on Memorial Day weekend, the catalytic converter was removed from my car in my own driveway. Local police came to collect my security video. They still have not closed the case, even with video of the perpetrator and their vehicle. Story 64. A friend of a friend came over who was a little psychotic, a lot actually. She had some, I think it was perfume, really cheap stuff. She told her parents where we live. We were housing her since she and her partner were both homeless. Her mother came over with the grandfather and began honking and knocking on the door constantly, screaming about us stealing things. Thankfully, I am a large guy and know how to look much scarier than I am. I also work security and deal with drunk or mentally unstable homeless people. I worked at a charity hospital catering to helping the poor so I could stay calm. I walked out the side door of our house, dressed in a security uniform, shoulders back, chest out. I said, "You are not welcome here. Leave. The police are on the way and the response time is less than 5 minutes. You will be trespassed." They backed off quickly but pulled into the neighbor's driveway and continued being disruptive despite having retrieved their perfume. The police showed up. They didn't care that the people said they were not on my property, so they couldn't be trespassed and trespassed them anyway. They spoke with them for a few minutes, and then they left. We kicked the lady out a few weeks later because we couldn't take her drama anymore. She had fainting spells whenever someone was paying attention to her and asthma attacks when she stopped getting attention for more than a minute. She went through 3 of my inhalers and I found one in the trash. She never did her dishes, and the floor was like her trash can. The list went on. Story 65. I was walking home when they asked if I was okay. I was under the influence and in my own world, so I was probably walking strangely. I just said I was walking home, and they left. Story 66. Saw a couple of police officers eating at a lunch counter. They seemed like regular customers, so I asked what they recommended. Story 67. I was working in retail a few years ago when an officer wanted to come in to inspect the building. He said he wanted to make sure we were all safe. It was strange. He had no cause, and our door was locked for the night, but he insisted on coming in to look around. The manager let him in, and he just looked in our back rooms, then left. I have no idea what that was about, but the manager said they let him in regardless of it being private property and him having no legitimate reason to be there. Story 68. I was out for a run when a woman and her boyfriend got into a fight. I stood up for her, he became physical, and then ran away. The police were called, and I had to give a statement. Nothing really came from it, although I was offered the option to press charges. I just hope she ended that relationship as soon as possible. Story 69. A man was unresponsive in a running vehicle in the parking lot at my workplace. I tapped his window and called out to him. Eventually, I called emergency services, and they were able to wake him. They took him to the station to ensure he was okay and to get him checked, and his car was towed. My guess is fentanyl. Story 70. The sheriff showed up looking for a woman I have never met, but we keep receiving mail for her. We have reported several times that she does not live here. She missed a jury summons, and they were here to collect her. Moral of the story: change your address when you move and do not ignore a jury summons. Story 71. My car was stolen about a month ago. A couple of weeks later, they called me to inform me that it had been used in criminal activity and had been burnt out. Story 72. A stray dog was running around the neighborhood. He was in my front yard. A neighbor drove up and parked in the street in front of my house. The neighbor grabbed him by the collar only and threw him into the truck through an open window. This is not a brutal crime and maybe not a crime at all. However, it is absolutely animal abuse. I am definitely not a dog person. Story 73. The boring answer is that it was a police stop, but the exciting answer, if you want to know the last time I spoke to a police officer on purpose, was the time someone left heroin in my mailbox. The police told me to take it back to the post office and stop wasting their time. My brother, did you not hear the part where it is heroin? Story 74. I neglected to pull over into the far lane when I saw him at a car stopped on the edge of the road. He chased me. I am a good driver and only received a warning. He was very good looking, so I chatted with him for a minute or two. It made my day. Story 75. I did not want to go to the hospital, and my drugged brain did not remember that I do not have a choice. So they called the police to make me go. Story 76. They pulled me over for rolling a stop sign in a supermarket parking lot at 10 p.m. in a small town when no one else was around, and I was driving for friends. I hope everyone felt safer that night knowing the law was out there keeping our streets safe from people like me. Story 77. When I confronted my mother, who was physically attacking me and trying to push me down the stairs, she was abusing prescription medications. When I pushed her off me, she fell and slammed her face into the wall, causing her nose to bleed heavily. She then called the police and claimed I had beaten her. What she didn't know was that my sister was recording the entire incident. So when the police arrived, I showed them the video. One officer told me he was relieved to have the video because he was prepared to arrest me based on my mother's statements and the blood on her. In typical narcissistic fashion, she let her nose bleed all over her chin, mouth, and chest, smearing it to make it look like she was covered in blood. Story 78. Filed a report because 2 men trespassed on our property and attempted to steal our cars at 1:30 a.m. this week. Story 79. Last night, my mother, who is at high risk of suicide, decided to go on a late-night angry drive. This resulted in 4 police officers coming to my house. They found my mother by using her Apple Watch to track her phone. She is home safe now. Story 80. Called the police on some men who were trying to cut my car's catalytic converter near downtown of my state's capital. I had already confronted them and I was armed. They ran away. The police said they would send someone out immediately. 55 minutes later, a cruiser arrived. There is nothing we can do. Sorry. Unpleasant experience. Story 81. I was hit by a car at the airport. It was a minor incident. The police officer said, "You should not have been there." Then he walked away without checking if I was okay. Story 82. They approached me because I was smoking marijuana in public. I showed them the prescription and they let me go. Story 83. The family I nanny for had a gas leak scare. The police and firefighters came and took our statements. Happy ending, thank goodness. Story 84. Refused to answer the door for a door-to-door saleswoman. Eventually, she started banging on our door and said it was because she heard our daughter crying. My wife told her we were all good, just a normal temper tantrum. Shortly after, we got a knock from the police doing a welfare check. Story 85. I asked the neighbors if they could keep their dog quieter because we had just had a baby. Their dog would bark for half an hour straight, then an hour later bark again, and would do this all night and day. No one was getting any sleep except the baby in patches. The neighbor said barking is what dogs do, then yelled over the fence something about me being a pedophile. I went to the police just to have a record of it because it was not the first time they had done something antisocial. The police said they would not log it because there was no crime. Story 86. Looking for one of my father's tenants. My father rents trailers to people with Section 8 housing assistance. The police are around frequently and recognize me by sight. Story 87. We have police officers come around our farm every day. Sometimes they stop to look at the animals, so I talk to them. Story 88. We went to the police station because we were harassed by the parents of my younger brother's girlfriend. They were very paranoid. Story 89. It must have been when I was a child, and my friend was beaten up in front of me. They asked me what I saw. It was probably about 25 years ago. Story 90. Last time I called, we had a serious domestic incident on the street outside our house. Most recently, police officers arrested a person at my workplace. Story 91. I had to call an ex I broke up with who threatened to kill herself. I had to take it seriously because when I broke up with her, she called her job, quit, and kept making suicide threats. Before that, detectives knocked on my door asking if I saw or heard anything when there was a murder in the building behind my place. Story 92. My dad went into psychosis and I called my aunt. I told her I was keeping him prisoner. I had built a wooden platform or prison around him but removed it when anyone official came to check on him. She called the police on me. They carried out a wellness check and determined he was okay. I got the general practitioner to hospitalize him. He had a severe infection combined with epilepsy medication poisoning because his kidneys couldn't break down the drug. Story 93. I turned in a large municipal manhole cover to the authorities last week. I found it in the building I recently rented for my new business. It is highly illegal to be in possession of it. Story 94. My sister got pulled over on my birthday. Because of her abusive ex and the restraining order she has against him, they identified me and took my pistol for about 20 minutes while waiting for verification. I wasn't him. We do look alike, with the same facial hair and both having buzz cuts. Story 95. Being suspicious for going to the bathroom 3 times in 2 hours. My hands were dirty. Apparently, this old man, probably over 65, saw me and thought I was smoking in the public bathrooms. So he called the police on me and then heavily cursed me out. Story 96. My neighbor, an elderly lady, called the police and then called me to accompany her because she believed the son of my front neighbor was throwing pebbles at her house. I checked my security camera and saw it was not that boy but another child passing by. I sent her the video, but she insisted it was the son of my front neighbor. The police arrived, and I went outside because I did not want her to be in trouble. I ended up talking with two friendly police officers about my dogs, and we shared pictures of our pets. Then the front neighbor appeared and started shouting at me because he thought I was the one who called the police. Story 97. I was pulled over for going 9 miles per hour over the speed limit, which mysteriously increased to 15 miles per hour over when a second police officer arrived. I was indeed speeding, so I had no valid defense. I hired a lawyer, recommended through a referral that reduced the fee by half, to negotiate a lesser charge that would not raise my insurance rates. This was a cost-saving decision in the long term. The officers were polite but somewhat frustrating. Story 98. I reported a car accident. I was at fault. However, I believe the other driver was under the influence and did not report the incident. Story 99. Walking to the bus around 11 p.m., I walked past a car dealership when suddenly the alarm went off inside. 10 seconds later, a police car arrived, and of course they saw me walking away from the scene, so they started questioning me. Eventually, they found someone inside, so I was free to go. I still made it to the bus on time. Story 100. I witnessed drug addicts hitting and screaming at another person, then trying to throw her into the water. Her passive, intoxicated condition indicated she was unable to swim. I did not want to see someone drown in front of me, so I yelled and screamed to make them stop. After they stopped dragging her to the water and pulling her hair, I broke down in tears. I was 3 months pregnant and emotionally overwhelmed. The police asked if I had been attacked because of my intense emotional reaction, but that was not the case. That was the last time I remember speaking to the police. Story 101. Got stopped by 16 police officers while driving a borrowed car that had been reported stolen. I was late for an appointment and borrowed my friend's car to make it in time. Not long after I left, a police car sped past me in the opposite direction. A bit unusual, but I thought nothing of it. Then another one passed. When I got to the main road, there were several more. Unusual for that area. I started wondering what had happened. A little later, I saw one behind me. I slowed down and pulled to the side to let him pass. But when he slowed down too and moved to the edge, it became clear he wanted me to stop. He walked up to my window and asked me to turn off the engine. I told him, "This is going to look strange, but I can explain. I haven't stolen the car." Then I calmly reached for the screwdriver, stuck it in the ignition, and turned the car off. More police cars started arriving. I explained that the car had been stolen some weeks earlier but was recovered and returned. The ignition just hadn't been fixed yet. He asked me to step out of the car, patted me down, and I explained the situation in more detail. It was cold, so he asked if I wanted to sit in the police car while they sorted it out. I agreed. Here, police cars are not like the American ones. No cage, and the equipment is built into the console. Just a regular car, mostly. This one had 4 officers in it, maybe coming back from training. I got the middle seat in the back between 2 tall officers. A bit awkward, but they were all polite. It turned out that my friend's neighbor had seen me driving and called it in. She knew the car had been stolen but did not know it had been returned. Because of poor reception down there, one of the patrol cars had to drive out to my friend's place to check the story. While waiting, the officers were talking over the radio, and it was clear they suspected it was just a misunderstanding. But they had to confirm it before letting me go. Eventually, they got the message that everything was in order. They apologized for the trouble and for making me miss my appointment. Story 102. Witnessed a couple physically fighting in their car beside ours, with a toddler perched on top of a car seat in the back, when we went to get ice cream. Just as we were going to enter the restaurant, the couple got out, and the female asked me to call the police. Then they got in their car and sped away, with the child still improperly restrained. The police called me back later to inform me they found the couple and that they admitted to being equally responsible. I wonder how that poor child is doing. Story 103. Christmas Day, my dad's neighbors got into a fight, so we called the police and an ambulance because someone had a knife and another person was bleeding. We had to make a few statements. Everyone was okay in the end. Story 104. I work in a liquor store, so it is common for us to talk to customers. Last time I had to speak to someone was because a landscaping company was giving our employees a hard time. All their employees looked very young, and none of them had any form of government identification proving their age. As a result, we could not sell to them, and they became angry. The last time we called the police was because they finally showed us identification, but they were fake. Story 105. If you do not count the word no when they asked at a breath stop, "Have you been drinking today?" Then it was when they gave me my brother's death notification. Story 106. I honked at a van that cut me off, so they decided to pull me over and search me instead. They were complete and utter officials. Story 107. Someone was driving around my neighborhood with their arm out the window while holding a handgun. I called emergency services, and the police arrived to speak with me. Story 108. Walmart mistakenly delivered a package to my neighbor's house, and they never returned it to me. They were in and out of the house that same day. When the police officer knocked on their door because they did not answer when he initially knocked, which is why I did not go there myself to retrieve my package, the person who answered gave me my package, which was opened. He claimed his younger sister opened it, thinking it was hers from Amazon, even though the Walmart logo was on the box, along with my name and address. His younger sister, whom we assumed was a small child, was actually 16. The police officer told him that was a felony and that the next time they receive incorrect mail, they should take it to the post office or return it to the owner themselves. He then told me afterward that it would have been acceptable for me to call emergency services for this. I had simply gone to the station to ask for assistance. Story 109. I watched a drunk driver slam into an off-ramp barrier on my way home from work. I work nights, and this was at 3 a.m. The guy's car clattered to a stop. I pulled up, thinking somebody had a medical emergency, so I immediately called emergency services and gave my initial report. When the driver moved his car out of the middle of the freeway and pulled up next to me, I said, "Oh my God, man, are you okay?" In slurred speech, he responded, "Yeah, I'm good, man. I'm just going to get off here." He drove off the next off-ramp with both passenger side tires shredded, sparks flying the entire way. Emergency services advised me not to follow, so I gave them the street he took after the highway and went home. Story 110. A mentally unstable person I know saw me drive past their home because construction and a detour sent me down their street. I found out later that they reported this to the police, saying I was observing their home and essentially stalking them. They got into their vehicle, attempted to run me off the road, and yelled at me from their vehicle. I went to the police station to see if I needed to do anything. It turns out they know this person well and are aware they are mentally unstable, often making things up and leaving out important details. They never mentioned the attempt to run me off the road and fabricated the part about me observing their home. I barely know this person, but they have done similar things to others I know, creating elaborate stories about being stalked, harassed, or even assaulted. The officers told me my name was not on the report and I had nothing to worry about. They advised that if I have any more interactions with this person, I should report it to them immediately. Story 111. Welfare check on a chronically depressed friend in another country who was constantly online, had no in real-life friends, and then suddenly went dark. They shouted and swore at me when the police arrived to check on them. I stopped speaking to them after that. Story 112. Got pulled over because my taillight was out. I had also been driving with an expired inspection sticker for several months. I told the sheriff I knew it was only a matter of time before I got stopped and that my rocker panels were the reason I had not fixed it. The difficult part was that I could not find my current insurance information. Despite assuring him that my registration was valid, it had also expired months ago, and I had forgotten to re-register. So, I was apparently driving completely unregistered and without a valid inspection. He was very understanding and just told me to get everything resolved as soon as possible. He could have issued a ticket and towed my car, but he let me go. Story 113. They failed to read house numbers and came to my door along with emergency medical services. Hopefully, whoever actually needed help received it. Story 114. A few years ago, I lived in a flat with rear windows. One window in the opposite building had been wide open with the curtains flowing in the wind for weeks. We called the police because we were very concerned. They discovered that the tenant had been on vacation, and the person they had asked to water the plants had not been trustworthy and had not set foot in the flat for days. Just a few minutes after the police left, the window was closed. Story 115. They were looking for someone named Brandy. I had just moved across the country. It was maybe my third day in the place. At 1 o'clock in the morning, there was a knock on my door. I grabbed my handgun and looked through the peephole. I saw 4 police officers standing on the other side of the door. I looked down at my shooting hand and said, "I should probably put this away." They asked me if Brandy was home. I said, "Wrong place, mate." They looked at me strangely and said, "Are you sure?" I told them the only brandy I had came in a bottle and it still had the cork on it, but if they wanted to have a look, they could go for it. They looked at me like I had an ambush waiting for them and said, "No thank you," then left. That was the weirdest experience I've had with the police, apart from the time I was suspected of being a murderer when I was homeless in my early 20s. Story 116. 2 complete strangers tried to break into the house I share with my dad. They were not able to get inside. They ran off when the police and my cousin arrived. It was scary and traumatizing. They were never caught. Story 117. My neighbor across the street has been regularly physically assaulting her husband. I called because she was visibly becoming violent again, and I knew that she desperately needed help with her anger and alcohol use. Story 118. A Mustang was speeding and driving recklessly in our 20 miles per hour street, and we have toddlers and young children in our neighborhood. Story 119. They were canvassing the neighborhood, asking everyone if we had seen an elderly neighbor with dementia who had gone for an extended walk. Story 120. One asked if they could come onto my bus to look for someone. I said, "Go for it." They didn't find who they were looking for, but the lad who smelled strongly of marijuana was very embarrassed. Story 121. About 2 months ago, a deputy sheriff came to my house to serve a warrant. The warrant had my address, but the person named did not live here and was unknown to me. I did not let him in and he left. Story 122. I was on a 3-day alcohol binge. I left the house early in the morning to drink all day. My wife called the police because she was concerned for my safety. The police caught up with me while I was walking out of a gas station and getting into a rideshare. They took my identification and told me they were concerned for me and that I should go home to my family, who were worried sick. That was enough for me to listen and actually be responsible and take their advice. They warned the rideshare driver not to take advantage of me and to get me home safely. Story 123. Neighbor across the hall was in the elevator with me, very drunk, and was vocal about ending his own life with his car. They got to him in time, thankfully, as he was just sitting in his car. Several days later, I heard 2 police officers talking negatively about him, saying he should have gone through with the suicide because they would have less paperwork. You can be sure I opened my door and confronted them. Story 124. Either calling a welfare check or the time 3 days before Christmas when a drunk driver hit my car while it was parked in front of my house, knocking it into the yard next door. Story 125. When I worked downtown, I would say hi to the Baltimore City Police as I walked past them. The Baltimore City Police are very nice. The last time I called emergency services, I saw a man lying down. He was conscious but unable to stand up, although he tried. It was likely related to alcohol, but I did not want to risk it being a blood sugar issue. The police responded and contacted an ambulance. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.